doctors don't have a clear understanding of it.
It started opening up my mind to how does the human body work?
This is a real thing that really affects people.
This is a major pain.
Welcome to Major Pain. I'm your host, Jesse Mercury, and today we'll be speaking with Cara Pierson about seasonal affective disorder. This is another condition that a lot of people consider to not be real, which annoys me. I mean, this is going to be a common theme on this show, that people experience chronic pain and other people tell them that it isn't real. So for anyone who lives in the Pacific Northwest, like I do for the last decade, you see people around you experiencing seasonal affective disorder, some of whom it gets very severe. So you know that it's real. But if you don't live in the Pacific Northwest, if you live in San Diego like I did for the first 25 years of my life, you probably don't meet people with seasonal affective disorder very often, if at all. So you might be under the impression that it isn't real because you've never seen it for yourself, experienced it, or met anyone who had it. And that's why we're doing this, is to demonstrate to you that it is real. Some people experience it, and let's build some understanding and empathy for people who experience chronic pain like seasonal affective disorder. We do talk a bit about suicide in this episode, so I just want to throw this out there in the beginning of the episode. If you are having suicidal thoughts, you do not have to go through this alone, and you can get through it. So call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, 1-800-273-8255, or just do a quick Google search for a local suicide prevention number if that's what you'd rather do. There's a lot of resources out there. I think all of us have experienced depression at one point or another in our lives, and I know that I've experienced depression that was very severe, and sometimes it just feels like there's no hope, but there is always hope. But if you're feeling alone and you're feeling depressed and you need help, reach out to that number, the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, 1-800-273-8255. I also want to share with you, this episode was recorded pre-COVID. This is the second of 3 podcasts that I recorded before the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic. And at the end of the episode, I always ask my guests, what would you like to share? Is there anything you'd like to plug? And Cara has a new plug that didn't exist pre-COVID, so I want to share it with you now. She's actually started doing online yoga classes. So if that's something you're interested in, having some sort of guided way to move your body, it's very adaptive. It can work for someone experiencing chronic pain. And as you're about to find out, Cara is a very knowledgeable person, healthcare professional, and might be able to help you out if you are looking for ways to move your body in a way that feels good, even if you don't feel good. Check out her website, carapierson.com, CARAPIERIAN.com. This will be the 3rd episode that I'm dropping all at once, right on the first day when this podcast launches. And then I'm going to get into some sort of release schedule for the episodes I have recorded moving forward and start recording new episodes as well. Like I said in the very first episode, I don't know what my schedule is going to be. I'm going to shoot for once a week and we'll see how it goes. I have these unpredictable flare-ups of pain and, body functionality issues where sometimes I just can't work on this. So I don't know if I'll be able to hold to a schedule, but I'm going to try. But I always appreciate any feedback at our email address, majorpainpodcast@gmail.com. And while this show is brand new, I extra appreciate any positive ratings and reviews on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Podcast Republic, wherever it is that you listen to podcasts. I really appreciate positive ratings and reviews. It's a dream of mine to hit that Apple Podcasts new and notable podcast list. So, hey, we might be able to make it happen with enough positive ratings and reviews on Apple Podcasts. And if that's something you're interested in seeing happen for this show, I'd love for your help. All right, let's get into our discussion with Cara Pierson about seasonal affective disorder. All right, here we go. I'm going to cut this part out.
First, we have to get the giggles out.
Yeah, get the giggles out. All right. Cara Pierson, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
I'm very excited to have you here. So tell us a little bit about yourself. Who are you?
Who am I? Oh my God, that's an open-ended question. I'm a different person every day. Well, let's see. I am a pediatric nurse practitioner by profession. I work with unique and quirky kids in a lot of different capacities. And in my personal life, I'm a traveler, writer, dancer, and just explorer of this world.
Nice. So you recently opened your own practice. I'd love to hear a little bit about that.
I did. So I was working for years at an autism clinic, which I really enjoyed. But it was time for me to make a career change, and I wanted to have a little bit more freedom and independence to really focus on the aspects of my job that I really enjoyed the most. And so I'm opening up a private practice that's centered around doing consultations for families whose kids have autism, also ADHD, sensory processing disorder, developmental delays, kids whose developmental trajectories are just a little bit different from the typical expected trajectories. And what I offer to families is guidance and counseling and coaching around a lot of the common day-to-day issues that can come up. Difficulties with eating, sleeping, behavior, getting along at school, getting the right services at school. And I really just want to help adults understand their kids and sort of be able to enjoy them more and have more harmony at home, and to really empower adults to help kids thrive and develop and, follow their own developmental pathways in a way that's going to really work for them. So, another gap that I wanted to fill is it's really hard to get specialized developmental services outside of major metropolitan areas.
Yeah.
So I'm offering my consultations via telehealth through online teleconferencing service, so that hopefully I can reach families who don't live right in Seattle.
Yeah. Or even for just anyone on the go who can't make it into the office.
Right.
Because parents are busy.
Parents are super busy. So, if someone wants to be able to take an hour break from work and visit with me, they can do that. I mean, another thing that comes up is for some of these kids, it can be really hard for them to go to new places and sit in a waiting room for a long time and then be, cooped up in an office while their parents talk with with a stranger for an hour. So the kids can stay at home and I can see them in their, natural habitat versus bringing them into an artificial clinical setting.
Yeah, super cool.
Yeah.
I can't, being a child with some sort of, developmental hurdle is one thing, but being the parent of a child is a whole different thing.
Yes.
So basically you're kind of helping on both sides of that. You're helping parents learn and helping children develop.
Exactly. I see parents and children as really like one system, one unit.
Yeah.
You can't impact one without impacting the other. So it's important. It's important for us to think holistically when we're addressing issues with kids.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah.
And if someone is interested in your services, where would they go to find you?
They would go to my website. It's called fullspectrumfamilies.com.
Cool.
And I chose that name because I work with kids who are on the full spectrum of autism.
Yeah.
But I also want to help people live, full spectrum lives, to have lives that aren't just dominated by disability care or dominated by, fighting the school system, but finding ways to overcome those hurdles and be able to deal with those things, but also enjoy, family time and recreation and good food and restful sleep and meaningful routines in the day.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, yeah, I hope that people will check you out. It sounds like a very cool niche way to help families that I've never really seen anyone do before.
Yeah, it's super niche. So, but I think that once people hear about it, it will connect. It'll make sense.
Yeah, totally.
I think it's filling a gap that that needs to be filled.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Cara, what is your major pain?
My major pain. So, I was kind of surprised when you asked me to join you on this podcast because I know it's about chronic pain. I was like, what? I don't have chronic pain. and then, you mentioned my seasonal affective disorder that I've had for, my whole adult life. And then, instantly it was like an aha moment. This is a major pain.
Yeah.
Seasonal affective disorder is my major pain.
Fascinating that you wouldn't think of it that way.
Yeah,
because,
I never had.
I have seen, well, okay, I have to say this real quick off the
Say
top. I had no experience with seasonal affective disorder because I grew up in San Diego, but about almost 10 years ago, I moved to Seattle, and it's a big deal up here. And
it is.
I've known a couple people who suffered from it in a very acute way, and you were by far the most acute case of seasonal affective disorder that I've seen. Yeah.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Well, I just know that, I just want to say off the top that this is a real thing that really affects people, and a lot of people laugh it off.
Yeah.
And that really bothers me, and I really appreciate you coming out to talk about it. So let's get into it. Tell me about your seasonal affective disorder.
Well, gosh, what can I say? It is real. It is real. And, it took me a while to accept that it was real. And it's been a kind of, my understanding of it has been evolving over the years. I think I first experienced or realized that I was experiencing seasonal depression and these, long gray winters, like in my mid or early 20s. And at first I really resisted it. I took it as a sign that something was wrong. There was something wrong with me or my life. I needed to fix things or change things or move somewhere sunnier. Like something was wrong. And so on top of the pain of just having these like long periods of depression that would come every winter, I also had this pain of really hating that I had depression, of really sort of having this panicky feeling of like needing to fix it. And, I certainly like went to psychiatrists and went to therapists, and I've tried a few different medications and so on. And those are all, helpful to a certain extent. And I'm glad I did do that. I'm glad I did seek out care and try to look for some solutions. But as I'm now in my mid 30s, and so I've been dealing with this for at least 10 years. And it hasn't gone away, but I found much better ways of coping with it. And beyond just finding ways to cope with it, I've also sort of reformulated its meaning to me in my mind, because my automatic reaction at first was the meaning of this depression was something is bad, something is wrong. And now I've sort of changed my sense of the meaning of this experience to this is part of my life. This is a signal that I need to slow down in the winter. This is a signal that I need to, keep working hard at developing the routines that work for me. And it's also sort of challenged me to change my definition of happiness.
Wow, there's a lot that you just said that's really fascinating. What does that mean to you, change the definition of happiness?
So, something that my favorite therapist once said to me that really stuck with me, and really helped me sort of redefine how I see happiness is that we tend to have a lot of words for the ways that we suffer. I'm grumpy, I'm in pain, I'm angry, I'm sad, I'm depressed, I'm blue, I'm melancholy, I'm mopey. Just like we can easily, come up with a lot of words in our regular vocabulary to describe different kinds of like negative states. But we often don't have a lot of words for happiness.
Yeah.
We talk about either just being happy or being not happy. But what is happiness? It can be a lot of different experiences. And so when I was thinking about it, I realized that I usually associated the word happiness with like, really high energy states of joy or elation. And the thing with my seasonal depression is I will go months without feeling joy
Wow.
or elation. But happiness can be so much more than that. And so what my therapist asked me to do that was a really useful exercise is list out as many words as you can that describe different kinds of happiness. And so I included high energy words, joy and elation, but also things like comfort, pleasure, connecting with a loved one, satisfaction, ease. And I just wrote a really long list. I filled up a whole page with words that are, synonyms for or different types of happiness or positive feeling states. And I realized I can still feel a lot of those feelings. So, one of the things that comes along with depression for most people is what's called anhedonia,
What's that?
which is just the inability or the great difficulty in feeling happiness or pleasure. And, to me, that can be the hardest part, even more so than feeling sad or feeling pessimistic or having no energy. It's when you do the things that usually give you pleasure and they just you don't get that same dopamine burst.
Totally.
That can be really pretty disturbing, to be honest.
Experienced that many times.
Yeah.
And it's horrible.
Hard. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, with something as simple as like, for me, playing Mario. I've been playing Mario since I was a little kid.
Yeah.
I love it. Mario Maker is my obsession.
Yeah.
And some days I'll play it and it feels bad because I was depressed before I started playing.
Right.
And it's like, what is wrong with me? This is what gives me joy and it doesn't give me joy. I'll never feel joy again.
Yes. It's a very disturbing feeling.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so that anhedonia is real, but even when I'm depressed, I make a point of doing things on a daily basis that bring me those other, quieter types of pleasure that can still help me feel satisfied with my life.
Yes. And what are some examples of that?
I mean, so sometimes, so I'm kind of a nerdy, brainy person. So sometimes my sort of entry point to feeling some kind of satisfaction with my day is reading and learning something new.
Yeah.
Which for me, at the end of the day, when I'm sort of evaluating my life before I go to sleep, which is maybe not a good habit, but when I'm like just sort of reflecting back on my life, I can be like, at least I learned something today.
Yes.
That's a reason to get up and try to do things again tomorrow.
Absolutely. Just, holding on to any victory is so important. And I think, finding ways to cognitively frame your own existence in ways that are positive, even when you feel like garbage.
Exactly.
Is a massively, massively valuable skill.
Yes. And it's a really tricky skill.
For sure.
It's counterintuitive.
Yeah.
To be able to find, a different kind of happiness, even when your brain is like not sending, those really like kind of high positive signals that we usually associate with, feelings of joy.
Yeah.
Other things that have been really useful for me are, applying mindfulness to the things that I do like. One thing that happens when I'm depressed is my mind kind of wants to sort of take over and just like go on these negative loops and really distract me from what I'm doing.
Yes, totally.
So
spinning out.
Yeah, totally spinning out. And so one of the things that I do is if I'm doing something that I know is pleasurable, and it doesn't have to be super exciting, it can be drinking this cup of green tea here, is just really slowing down and connecting to that experience of drinking the tea and not doing anything else. And taking a break from my thoughts just to focus on drinking the tea or whatever it is, because there's that pleasure and sensory experience, or comfort and sensory experience.
Yeah, I'm such a big fan of what you're saying of like be in the moment.
Yes.
That's one of the best ways to make your life more pleasurable.
Yes.
No matter what is happening. And I'm speaking as someone who's dealt with a massive amount of chronic pain, being in the moment is massive. You know, if I sometimes I need to use substances to get into the moment because I'm in so much pain. So be it like pain medication or, you know, marijuana or something like that. If your body is forcing you to be miserable, you know, give yourself permission to experiment with things in a careful way.
Yes.
And, you know, we're in Washington State where marijuana is legal, and there's a lot coming out about the health benefits of CBD, and that's something that I definitely use. But like, if I'm feeling so bad, I just can't do anything. All I can do is sit on the couch. Well, maybe I'll get stoned and watch a movie, you know?
Yeah.
And that's going to be better than sitting on the couch in pain, thinking about how much pain I'm in. If I can distract myself in any way and just focus on the distraction, it really helps.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Because I mean, that's all life is all of these moments. And when we're sort of just reflecting on the past or planning for the future or feeling anxious about the future, like our lives just go by without us even realizing it.
Yeah. And for me, whenever I've been in a depressive state, those thoughts always go negative.
Oh, absolutely.
And I just think about negative things happening to me.
Absolutely.
Or like what I'm doing going in a negative direction or how bad everything can go.
Yes.
And none of those things are going to happen to me.
Yes.
Probably. Maybe like of all the obsessive thoughts I've had about what could go wrong, maybe like 5% of them have come to pass. And they were awful. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
And I premeditated how bad they were going to be. So it was even worse.
Yep.
So long story short, it's not healthy either way, because if you're
Exactly.
premeditating something negative so that you can kind of prepare your mind for it, it's going to be worse because it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
And you're experiencing the bad thing twice.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And all the ones that didn't happen to you that you thought through, you didn't need to spend that energy in that negative space.
Yes.
So pull yourself back into the moment and just find something to distract yourself, like, and you know, knitting, pinball, movies, video games.
Yes.
There's a lot you can do stationary, and I've experimented with a lot of this.
Yeah.
And it helps. It helps.
Yeah. And you've really brought your strengths to bear on improving your your quality of life, your strengths of creativity and your optimism. Or your choice to be optimistic.
Yes.
Because I think for a lot of us, it does have to be a choice.
Yes.
So yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, I think the same of you. Absolutely. I mean, well, yeah, and I'd like to expand on that for a second, because I think you and I are both, you know, we're friends. We know each other outside of this podcast. And I think both of us are people who have negative tendencies that we need to ignore.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Yep.
So how do you do that? How do you go about doing that?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. It's so tricky because, just counteracting a negative thought doesn't work for me anyway. And I think for a lot of people, if I have a negative thought coming up, just trying to quote unquote be positive, it feels like a kind of denial or repression. It's just like it makes me feel worse.
It feels like a suggestion from someone who doesn't know what the fuck they're talking about.
Exactly.
I can't be positive. I'm depressed. Damn it.
Yeah.
You know?
It's like, shut up. Get out of my head.
Yeah.
So
someone telling you to be positive when you're depressed is the worst. It's
so
the
awful.
worst. Yeah.
It's just not helpful
Not
at
helpful.
all.
No.
Yeah. So I have to like really, first of all, just noticing that I'm having negative thoughts. Because, sometimes the mental chatter is just going in the background and like you're listening to it, but you're not really aware. Oh, this is a chain of negative thoughts. So just being aware that I'm having them, and then acknowledging, actually, I have some control over this mental chatter. So I'm going to stop right now. And very often what I need to do is I can use some like thought stopping and trying to think the opposite thing. And sometimes that works. But very often what's most helpful is just like changing the scenario. So if I'm sitting at my desk and I'm doing some work and I'm thinking, oh, this is going terribly, this is taking too long, I'll never get through it all, I'm making all these mistakes, blah, 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 just like on this negative thread. First I need to catch myself doing that. And then I need to, put down my work and get up and walk outside.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes simply just like changing the scenery is enough. So like just stepping out and walking outside is actually a big one for me because I get the benefit of, changing the scenery, going through a doorway, which in and of itself can sometimes just make me forget what I was thinking of anyway. When you walk into a room looking for something and you're like, what was I looking for the moment you walk through the doorway?
Yeah.
So like walking through the doorway, sometimes I just forget what I was thinking about, which is great in this case. And being outside makes a big difference. So one thing that I try to do all winter, whether I'm at work or whatever's going on during the day, is I do try to get outside and walk in the middle of the day. Even if it's a gray, overcast day, just that little bit of UV light makes a big difference. So doing those little simple activities to sort of cut off this obsessive chain of thought and shift my experience makes a big difference.
Yeah. You also mentioned thought stopping, which I use that one a lot. So what I do for myself so often is like I'll spin out about something and I'll be like, what if this happens? And then the thought that I always stop those thoughts with is, if that happens, I'll deal with it. Like I'll deal with it then. I don't need to deal with it now because it hasn't happened yet.
Yes.
So if it happens, I'll deal with it. And I'm a strong enough person to deal with it.
Yes.
Like this thought, I can think of all these different ways to deal with it. That's why I'm spinning out, is because I'm thinking of ways to deal with it.
Exactly.
But why don't I just wait to find out if it happens before I do that?
Yes.
So I tell myself that constantly, and then bring myself back into the moment. That's my constant mantra, is like, stop this thought, deal with it if it happens. Don't worry about it now. Let's play some Mario.
Yep, totally. I saw somewhere, someone, I think she was a comedian, who said, if you're anxious, that's really a sign of intelligence and creativity, because you can think about all of the ways that something can go terribly wrong. Looking on the bright side there.
Totally. So, okay, you mentioned a bunch of things I wanted to come back to. One of them was that you rebelled against this when it first started.
Yeah.
So let me get some background information. How long have you lived in the Pacific Northwest?
My whole life.
Okay, so you've lived here your whole life,
Yes.
and then this popped up in your mid-20s.
I think so. I mean, like, I definitely was a weird, quirky kid, which is, probably why I like to work with weird, quirky kids now. And so I'd say I was a little maladjusted, but
You?
yeah, but I don't know if I was depressed.
Okay.
I mean, I think there must have been something about some kind of developmental aspect of like growing up, or, having a fully developed brain, or hormonal changes or something. I do think the depression like started in my early to mid 20s.
So when that first started, what did you think was happening?
Gosh, I don't know. I think I thought that I must be doing my life wrong. I thought that I was
Okay.
making myself depressed.
So you thought it was your own fault.
Yeah. So I thought that maybe I was studying the wrong major, or picked the wrong job, or had a bad mind, or was thinking the wrong thoughts, or born on the wrong planet. I mean, I still think that sometimes.
Oh my God, I think that about myself every day.
Yeah.
This is why I have a science fiction
Okay.
podcast.
Yeah. I think we relate to each other on that level. But yeah, I really took it as a sign that something was wrong. I was also, and okay, maybe this is a little esoteric or advanced here, but I was also judging the depression as bad.
Yeah, I think everything you're saying is like 100% what almost everyone will think.
Yeah.
That it's their fault.
Yeah.
And that depression is bad.
Yeah.
And not to say that depression is good, but I think that in some ways depression is neutral,
It is
because
what it is.
It is what it is. Like, I think a lot of people experience depression for reasons that are completely outside of their control.
Yes.
And recognizing that it's something happening to you, not something being generated from you, is for me has been really important.
Yes.
And seasonal affective disorder is
absolutely that way because you are reacting to the environment.
Yeah, it's more obvious in that case.
Do you know anything about the science of this and why it happens and anything like that?
I feel like
that was a great eye roll that I hope the mic picked up the eye roll.
I feel like I should, but I can't explain it really well.
Okay.
I do think that there are a lot of things that science doesn't really understand super well about depression in general.
Absolutely.
I mean, I think we all know, like in the 90s and in the early noughts, we were all sort of sold on this idea that depression was simply a chemical imbalance. Like you have insufficient serotonin, and so if you just take this pill that gives you more serotonin, then your depression will go away. And it's totally chemical. And I guess a good thing about that was it kind of destigmatized depression a little. Like it took out that moralistic kind of theory of depression and sort of replaced it with this chemical imbalance theory of depression. But now as we're learning more, it seems that that's not really true. That's not really exactly how it works. I mean, antidepressants that boost your serotonin do help in a lot of cases, but how they help is not just by boosting the serotonin. It's once the serotonin is boosted, it seems that your neurons actually start to make more and new connections. Which suggests to me that there's something going on with depression where, I mean, we've all had this experience of like getting stuck in a loop of thinking the same really painful thoughts over and over again. And, that I think is a great example of where our minds need to branch out and make new connections and different ways of mentally responding to those situations, creating new thoughts in those same habitual situations. And so, I'm kind of like just sort of going off and hypothesizing here, but I wonder if depression is more about, our brains just sort of closing down a little bit and sort of like narrowing focus and sort of giving up on a certain amount of like creativity.
Yeah, and I wonder if maybe something about not getting, sunlight. Like your brain is switching how it functions because it's not getting something that it's used to or really needs in some way.
Yeah.
So it's switching into a different mode.
Yeah.
And somehow, I mean, I am not a healthcare professional. Like I'm just spitballing here.
No,
yeah.
I think you're on the right track there. I mean, clearly there's a connection with light. I mean, we know that seasonal affective disorder is triggered by the lack of the seasonal lack of sunlight. That's why, that's why it happens in the winter and then improves over the spring and summer. We also know that in a lot of cases when people have depression, I think whether it's a seasonal depression or just plain old major depressive disorder, using a UV light box for a certain number of minutes every day can be as effective or more effective than antidepressants for a lot of people.
I was going to ask you about that. That's fascinating.
Yeah. So that is something that I do as well. And it helps.
Yeah. Okay. That's interesting. Well, that reminds me, what else have you done that has helped? You mentioned going to see a therapist or other doctors. What are some things that you've tried that you found to be beneficial that you think other people might want to give a try?
So yeah, working with therapists has been wonderful. It took me a while. Like it took me, I think, a couple years to like come around to going to a therapist. I'm not sure why. I don't think I had any particular stigma around it. I just sort of like didn't know how to find somebody.
Yeah.
But then when I was in grad school, I was aware that we had a counseling center and free counseling, and I took advantage of that. And I'm so glad that I did. So I've had a few different therapists now, and each one has had a different approach, and each one has been helpful for me in different ways. Also, working with a psychiatrist to figure out medications has also been helpful. I've tried. and with psychiatry, it's like it's an art and a science. Like you kind of usually have to try a few different things before you find a medication that sticks, if you end up finding a medication that sticks. So I definitely tried a few things that like did not work and had some weird side effects. But ultimately settled on like a pretty low dose of sertraline. Really, it hasn't transformed my depression, but it keeps me from feeling the really low lows. I used to have the experience of periodically during the winter, just like getting in such a low. It was hard for me to like dig myself out. Just feeling so bad. I couldn't do the things that made me better.
Which is such a real thing.
It's so real.
Yeah. And that's a really hard place to be in.
Yeah.
I've experienced some of that as well, where like no amount of trying to pull yourself into the moment can work.
Yes.
And those
can't
days
force
you just have to
yourself
like,
out of bed.
you just have to ride those days out and they
Yes.
suck.
Yeah. And like, sometimes even thought
yeah.
stopping doesn't work on those
Right.
days. Like you can't even talk to yourself positively.
Right.
Yeah. So the low dose of sertraline keeps me out of those
Okay.
days. It gives me, just enough of a boost that when I am feeling depressed, I can at least do the things and think the thoughts that that help me feel a little bit better and
Nice.
reconnected to my life.
That's great. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great to have that tool in your toolkit. I was going to ask you this and then I got sidetracked and forgot, but you mentioned being like rebelling against your depression.
Yeah.
I'd like to hear a little bit more about that, and particularly how did that shift and how did you accept your depression? Because it sounds like that's where you got to.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think there have been a couple things sort of along my path that have really helped me reframe what depression means in my life. And it's very personal. It's just for me. Like I don't think that my way of finding meaning in depression is necessarily going to connect with other people, but I do think that it's important to try to find some meaning out of it. So the first experience that helped me start to put the pieces of this puzzle together were my thesis in grad school, studying to become a pediatric nurse practitioner and focusing on working with kids on the autism spectrum. I wanted to learn more about how parents coped with and came to terms with the fact that their child has a diagnosis of autism. And so I did this huge literature review and sort of had this big cluster of different types of studies looking at how parents coped. And it gradually sort of emerged to me that there were like 3 or 4 main kind of styles or categories of coping behaviors, including like venting your emotions, action-oriented coping, like doing a lot of things and taking care of a lot of business, so to speak, getting your kid into therapy, this, that, and the other thing. So venting your emotions, action-oriented coping, I forget what the other one was. And then the 4th category was changing your sense of life's meaning. And the only one that was associated more consistently with like positive outcomes was changing meaning. The other forms of coping could be helpful temporarily, but ultimately, like parents had to, over time and in their own way and hopefully with some support of the people in their lives, change their sense of meaning of what it means to be a parent. Their sense of meaning around like what a good childhood is, their sense of meaning of sort of like what they're getting out of or contributing to everyday life. And that's a big task.
Sure. Yeah.
That is a big, complex, and really personal, individualized task. But that is the kind of coping that sticks. So I was like, It was for me, it was a really interesting finding. Like, I'm glad I did my thesis on that, but it also made me feel a little bit powerless as a new provider. Like, what am I going to do to help people change their sense of meaning in life? But it's interesting to know that that's an important part of the process. And I think now that I'm a more mature provider, I do try to incorporate that into my work. But it also had an influence on how I started to think about my depression. It took me a while to kind of put two and two together and connect those things. And I think the other big thing that sort of helped me change my sense of meaning around my depression was actually mythology, storytelling.
Wow.
Yeah.
Tell me more.
Yeah. And I'm actually kind of surprised by this too. But for years, I've just had sort of a nerdy interest in ancient Greece. I don't know why. I'm interested in sort of following findings on ancient Greek archaeology and mythology and, history and so on. But so I was doing a lot of, digging, trying to find different retellings of ancient Greek myths. And the one that really struck me was the myth of Persephone and her descent into the underworld. So I don't know if you ever read about the Greek myths in elementary school or anything, but
It's been a while.
Yeah.
I remember that Persephone exists, and that's about it.
Like that rings a bell.
What's the gist of the story?
Yeah, so the gist of the story is Persephone was the young goddess of the springtime. She was the daughter of the, earth goddess Demeter. So she was the goddess of the springtime, and she was associated with sunshine and flowers and girlishness. And one day she's out picking flowers in a meadow and wanders away from her friends. And a big crack opens in the ground, and out comes this dark chariot being driven by Hades, the god of the underworld and the god of the dead. And he abducts her, yoink, and takes her into the underworld. And she becomes his wife and the queen of the underworld.
That doesn't sound good.
Right? It doesn't sound good. But here's the interesting thing. I mean, depending on who's telling the story, Persephone in the underworld becomes, some people call her like the midwife for the dead. So she becomes the person who guides newly dead spirits through the process of navigating their new home in the underworld. And she provides them comfort and guidance in this time when they're completely bewildered. And she becomes a queen. She becomes the wife of an important god. She has a role. She has a job. She has a purpose, and she has to become pretty grown up. And the traditionally the story goes that she's quote unquote rescued from the underworld, however many months later, but she's tricked into eating 3 pomegranate seeds or 6 pomegranate seeds, depending on who you ask. And by eating the food of the underworld, she is permanently tied to the underworld. So she has to spend 3 to 6 months of the year in the underworld, even after she returns to the surface. So some people take that as a sort of a story about the seasons, why we have different seasons. When Persephone is in the upper world, it's sunny, it's bright, the plants are growing. But when Persephone every winter goes down into the underworld to take up her role as the queen of Hades, everything is dark, the plants die, the sun goes away. But for me, it's also sort of a story of like coming to terms with a life that is characterized by these 2 different phases.
Yeah.
And realizing that maybe one isn't better or worse than the other. It just is. It's a cycle of nature.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And it, anything that can bring you any sense of wholeness is valuable.
Absolutely.
No matter where it comes from.
Yeah. Like it's not it turns out it's not my calling in life to be joyful and cheerful in springtime all of the time. It's
Yeah.
my calling in life to be joyful and cheerful in springtime some of the time.
Yeah.
But also to be able to connect to those parts of life that are, darker or quieter or more still or more empty even. I think in our culture we don't really like sort of that flip side or that yin side of life. But it's really important. It's important to be able to slow down to see the quieter, darker, more even more just like receptive part of life.
Okay, so that starts to make sense of how you've integrated this seasonal affective disorder into your life in a more positive way. Do you feel like it is a part of you or something that happens to you?
Both. Like, it's not something that I chose. It's not something that I think is like an expression of my personality or whatever. It's not volitional. It's something, my seasonal depression is something that definitely came to me. I didn't come to it.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, it's part of me, right? Like I also didn't choose to, be born in the United States or to be born into such and such culture, but it's my culture is still a part of me.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. So I can't really separate myself from, the things that affect me or the things that are all around me.
Yeah, totally. And I think it's so important to recognize when something is like that.
Yeah.
Like for me, I went through a period where I was rebelling against the idea that I had this chronic pain.
Yeah.
And I would try to, ignore it or pretend it wasn't there or try to live a normal life where I wasn't, acknowledging it, and it would always get worse.
Yeah.
And then I'd get mad.
Yeah.
And that was not good for me.
Yes.
And when I started trying to work in conjunction with it and say, okay, well, if this is it's given that this is a part of me. Like I don't have control over that. So what can I do to make this manageable or better or, incorporate it into my life somehow? And then at a certain point, it started to feel like something, I hate to use this word, but something special about me, even though I hated it.
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes any sort of sense.
Yeah.
Where like if I could go back in time and remove it from my life, there was a period of time where I felt like, no, I wouldn't, because this has made me a more conscious adult.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now that like that was between flare-ups, then I had another big flare-up and I was like, well, fuck it. I don't need it. I don't want it. Get it out of me. Where's the time machine?
Yeah.
But unfortunately, I don't even know what it is. So I wouldn't know how to get it out if I wanted to. But yeah, I mean, I've gone through phases where I was glad to have had chronic health issues. Has that ever happened to you with this?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think like I don't enjoy it. And if there were a magic wand that could make seasonal affective disorder go away, I'd spring for that in an instant. Absolutely. But there are things that I've gained from having this experience and from having to, go through this whole process of coming to terms with this experience and learning to live with it and learning to sort of shape it to the extent that I'm able to. And I think that, one of the important things that I've gained is more empathy for what so many other people are going through.
Totally. That's the biggest thing for me too.
And that matters. It
does
really
matter.
matters.
It makes you a better person to be empathetic.
It does.
I'm just going to say it. Like I don't believe in black and white, and I don't believe in right and wrong in a lot of different scenarios, but I do think that having empathy towards other people makes the way that you interact with the world better.
Yes, it absolutely does. And, connecting with people is like a fundamental human need. And we do that through our empathy. And so having well-developed empathy is good. And it'd be nice if we could develop our empathy without having to go through really painful experiences. But I don't know if we can.
I don't think we can. I think that suffering is intrinsic to growth.
I agree.
Yeah, and that's the one thing about it, where it's like, the more you suffer, the more you either diminish or you grow.
Yes,
and you have to choose.
It can't be just any suffering. It has
Right.
to. You have to suffer skillfully
and consciously.
Yes.
Like you have to make the choices.
Yes.
And this is the thing that I always want to tell people, which is that if you are suffering, it is temporary, and even if it's going to continue to come back your entire life. Like seasonal affective disorder, you may have this problem every winter,
Exactly.
your entire life, but it's not going to happen every summer also.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, or even if you have chronic depression that is year round, you have better days, and you know that you've had better days.
Every day is different.
Every day is
Yep.
different, and tomorrow might be better.
Exactly.
And I know how hard that can be to, for me, like I go through months at a time where I'm on the couch all day, every day, and I can't get up
Yeah.
and do anything. And I'm always just waiting for that better day.
Yeah.
And I've been having better days this week.
Yay!
I went for 2 jogs in a row,
Hell
2 days
yeah.
in a row. That hasn't happened to me in a really long time.
That's
And it's
awesome.
been, a really long time that I've been thinking that wasn't ever going to happen again. And then
Right.
here it is. So
Yes.
always keeping yourself open to the possibility that you will have a better day the next day is so important. And,
Absolutely.
this is a very personal question, and we can cut this out if you don't want to answer.
Go for it.
Have you ever been so depressed that you were at the point of having suicidal thoughts?
No, I haven't really had suicidal thoughts. And I don't know if this is true, but I think that's because I'm always just curious about what's going to happen the next day. I'm really,
I love that.
yeah, I'm curious about what's going to happen in this life, even if it is kind of awful
Yeah.
sometimes or a lot of the times. And so I do think my curiosity is one of the things that keeps me going when it gets especially hard.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, and I think that people punishing themselves for having suicidal thoughts, there's no need to punish yourself for
No.
that, If
Yeah.
you've had the thought, so many people have.
Yeah.
But finding ways to move forward
Yeah.
is the important thing.
And acknowledging that it's just a thought. It's a
just a
thought that's
Yeah,
coming to
absolutely.
you.
Yeah.
You didn't ask for it.
It doesn't mean that you are suicidal and going to act on it.
Yes.
Just because this thought has occurred to you. And finding ways to keep yourself going is so crucial. And I think curiosity is a great one. It's a
Yeah.
really good one.
Yeah.
Yeah. For me, it's I'm also not someone who's ever been suicidal. And I think about a friend of mine who had chronic pain and did kill herself, and how horrible that felt to know that, she and I never sat down and talked about it because
Yeah.
I didn't know she was going through it. And
my
I
gosh.
wish that I could have talked to her because I
Yeah.
felt like maybe I could have helped. Maybe that's just, wishful thinking, but yeah, that's part of the impetus for me for wanting to make this podcast is to put ideas out there for people to cope, and
Yes.
ways for people to get through bad days.
Yes.
Those days where you can't get up.
Yes.
And it's going to be awful all day, and
Yes.
you in this horrible, deep despair about it. How do you get through that? And I love curiosity. Let's add that to the list.
Yeah.
Curiosity about how's tomorrow going to be.
Yep.
And also just reminding yourself over and over that you have had better days, and that means that it's possible to have more good days.
Exactly.
No matter what happens, no matter how bad things get, it is
Exactly.
always possible to have better days.
Yeah.
Always.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And I think I'm so glad that you're doing this podcast and that we're having this opportunity to talk about this, because I think it's so important that we all talk with other people about our pain.
Yes.
Whether you have chronic pain or mental illness or don't have any of those things, every single human has pain. And I think it's important that we talk with each other about it, because
Yeah.
meaning making happens socially. Like, it doesn't happen in isolation. And, we need to have those experiences of like connecting with others and sharing ideas with others to make meaning of the hard experiences that we're having and transform them into something more than just meaningless suffering.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Like, a lot of my loneliest days in my life have been my bad pain days.
Yeah.
Because I always feel like no one wants to hear about it.
Yep.
And I think I'm right about that, I don't know if I'm right or wrong, but I do feel like people don't want to hear about it.
Yeah.
Like, people don't want to people don't want to have like every interaction they have with me be like, well, I hurt today.
Right.
So I often hide it or downplay it or don't talk about it or just
Yeah.
suffer in silence alone
Yeah.
or just dump it all out on my significant other because,
Right.
which is horrible. But there needs to be, for me, there needs to be community around it, and there needs
Yes.
to be purpose
Yeah.
behind it. And this is my therapy,
Right.
Like, talking to other people, putting this collection of conversations together as a resource is my therapy.
Yes.
It's helping me give some meaning to what I've experienced.
Yeah.
And also, like we're recording on a day where I'm having a relatively good day, and that's great. And I can say right now, today's a better day.
Yay.
Like, I'm having a better day
It's a
today,
better day.
right now. And yesterday was pretty great also. So better days can happen.
Yes.
And, just because a day is awful doesn't mean every day is going to be awful.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel very passionately about these things.
That's
But-
awesome.
And it's because I've experienced it. Like, I didn't get it until I experienced it. And then I realized how wrong I was.
Right.
I used to be the type of person who would say, well, if you've got these chronic issues, like, you just need to solve them. Right. Yeah, just fix it. And that's the thing that doesn't exist is easy fixes.
Right.
Like, doctors don't understand depression.
There's no cure for the human condition.
Yeah, there's no cure for the goddamn common cold,
Right?
let alone like chronic depression,
Yeah.
seasonal affective disorder, fibromyalgia. Like, there's no cure for these things.
Exactly.
We don't even know what they are. Like,
Exactly.
fibromyalgia is a name for people who have chronic pain for we don't know why.
Exactly.
So when there isn't a cure, what do you do?
Mm-hmm.
When science hasn't caught up with what's happening with your body, which is my life,
Yeah.
like, what do you do? Because there are no scientific answers because the science isn't there.
Yeah.
So that's when you have to get creative.
Yeah.
Use your creative thinking and find ways to make your life closer to what you want it to be.
Absolutely.
And give up on the idea of having this perfect life and having
Yes.
everything that you want, and just celebrate what you do have, recognize what you do have, and have patience for the things that you
Mm-hmm.
want to have in the future, and be flexible with yourself.
Right.
And kind to yourself.
And it means relinquishing quite a lot of control sometimes and
Yeah.
letting life come to you.
Absolutely. I have one last question for you.
All right.
Well, actually, no, I have two questions for you. So how do you brace yourself for winter? And I guess, do you brace yourself for winter?
Yes, I do brace myself for winter. Probably the number one thing that I do to prepare myself for this pretty, predictable slump that might last 3 to 6 months is scheduling activities that are fun and ideally a little bit social and not too hard to do. Like, there can't be too much of a
Yes.
barrier to doing the activity.
Yeah.
It's like one of the things that I really enjoy actually is cross-country skiing, like going way out in the mountains and getting together all my equipment and, going out into the woods on skis. That's great when on a day when I have a lot of energy and I'm feeling pretty good and I've had time to like get everything all set up. But when I'm like really in a funk, there's no way I'm going to get out and go on a day or a weekend of cross country skiing to improve my mood, unfortunately. So one of the things that I started doing a few years ago that I thought would be, easy to do, warm winter activity was social dancing.
Yeah.
And so I'd go out, I took lessons and I'd go out dancing at least once a week. And even now, there's some days where I might, go out dancing just to sort of be there and maybe have a dance or two. But even if I don't have like the energy or mental wherewithal to dance all night, just showing up and having that on my calendar can really help.
Yeah, that's great.
So scheduling some activities, planning workouts. So like joining a gym is sort of part of my depression treatment strategy. Also planning workouts that are, not too intimidating.
Mm-hmm.
I was working with a personal trainer for a while, and he gave me a set of like 1 hour workouts, and I'm like, nope. I went through and reworked it so that it was half an hour, because that's like less intimidating when I'm feeling like really low energy and depressed. So having some low barrier workouts scheduled is another important thing that I do. That and making time to go outside every day. That's my pill box. That's my treatment toolkit.
Yeah, I think that's massive. And that's what I'm trying to do right now is like get some exercise, because I haven't been able to in a really long time.
Yeah.
And on any day where I feel like I can at all,
Yes.
I try to do it. Even just some stretches, get my blood moving a little bit, move my body around.
Anything.
Human bodies are made to move.
Absolutely.
And when you stop moving them, it becomes harder to do so.
Yep.
And when you're already having difficulty moving your body for something completely unrelated to your physical body, but your body's health, I mean, obviously chronic pain is happening in my body, but it's
Right.
not like...
you can still move your arms and legs, theoretically.
Sure. Yeah, and like some days that's so painful I can't,
Yeah.
but on days where it's not, I try to force myself to, even if like, I it's hard to give up your ideas about what a workout is.
Yep.
Like I used to, bike to the gym and then lift some weights and then bike home, and that was a big day. But now it's like, okay, if I can get outside and just doing anything,
It can make a big difference.
Just a little bit of stretching,
Catch
yeah.
22 about like being in pain or being depressed is like my depression tells me, oh, walking around the block isn't going to make any difference. So don't even do it.
Yes, totally.
And then I have to use my grown-up voice,
Yes.
my mothering myself to say, actually, it will make a difference.
Yes.
Put on your shoes.
Yes.
Put on your coat.
Totally.
Walk around the block.
Yeah.
If that's all you can do today, it will make a difference. And it always does.
Always.
But you have to counter that little voice that says, I can't, or it's not going to be worthwhile, or
Right.
this treatment that you're doing is so small that you might as well not do it. Not true.
Right. There's no physical activity that is too small to be worth doing.
I 100% agree.
Even just like days where I've been on the couch and in a lot of pain, I would start trying to like stretch while lying down on the couch.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, just like stretch out my back, like move my legs around, move my body just a little bit on the couch. And it really helped.
Absolutely.
It really helped.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I think that's massive. Yeah, and I know how hard I know how hard it is to not be able to move your body and to want to be able to. So I get that, and I'm not saying to like punish yourself on days that you can't.
Right.
And just like acknowledging that there are days where you can and days where you can't, and to make the effort to try on days where you can, I think is massively, massively helpful.
Yep.
And moving your body does release like dopamine in your brain.
Yeah,
it will make you
absolutely.
feel better. It's designed that way.
Yeah.
Your body's designed to make you feel better
Yep,
when you move around.
Move lactic acid and inflammatory markers out of your tissues,
Yeah.
and it makes you feel good.
Yeah. And I've had the experience where I've tried to exercise and it makes me feel so sick after. And like, I still don't really understand why, but I've had a lot of experiences where I tried to move and got, it felt like it flushed something into my body that was just causing pain everywhere.
Yeah.
And those are the days where I know that I really shouldn't, because it's too taxing on my body. And like, I will like go into muscle spasms and be in so much pain. It's like, okay, well that wasn't a good result, but I'm at least
follow
glad I
those
tried.
signals. Yeah.
And I think those are the days where I did too much,
Yeah.
like I tried to bike somewhere when I shouldn't have. I should have just like gone for laps around my house.
Totally.
Where I can stop at any time. And yeah, being careful is so important. But
It really is.
But yeah, the trying is really, really important. Okay, last question. I hate this question, but I'm going to ask it to you anyway.
Go right ahead.
Have you thought about moving to some place where there is sun year round?
Absolutely. I mean, I think about it all of the time, but at the same time, like so many of the things that give my life meaning, you know, and make me feel connected to my life are here in Seattle. My partner, my work, I have family in the area. I love the Pacific Northwest. I mean, despite the gray winters, it's just a really beautiful part of the world. So I would definitely have to like give that up to move somewhere that's sunny year round. So I've decided not to make that move, but yeah, of course I think about it.
Yeah.
It's an option.
Yeah. And I just want to say the reason I hate that question is because I feel like it has a prejudice in it that people are not doing something that could help them by choosing to stay.
You could fix this if only you moved.
Right. Yeah. And I just want to say that, like, you, first of all, you don't know that.
Exactly.
And second of all, there's so many, it's like people's lives are complex and there's so much happening. I mean, this is your home, you know?
Yeah,
like,
this is my home.
One person's assumption that like giving up your home would help you is not necessarily true for you.
Exactly. And depression, the seasonal depression, it's a big part of my life, but it's not everything in my life. There's a lot that matters to me that's keeping me here.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I really, really appreciate your time. This has been a really fascinating discussion, and I think hopefully a really helpful discussion.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't imagine how this couldn't be a helpful discussion to anyone experiencing anything similar to you.
It's been helpful for me.
Yeah.
Just talking about it. I'm really glad that you're asking these questions. I think it's awesome.
Yeah. And I really appreciate you being here and being so open and honest. It's really valuable. So thank you.
You're welcome.
So tell us again your website and your business and where people can find you if they want to.
Okay. Yeah. So my business is Full Spectrum Families, and you can find it at fullspectrumfamilies.com. And I do online child developmental consultations. I specialize in working with families whose kids are on the autism spectrum, as well as kids with other, unique developmental trajectories. And I work with families in the state of Washington, anywhere in the state of Washington.
Nice. I asked this to the last person I had on the show. If people have advice for how to deal with seasonal affective disorder, is that something you want to hear or don't want to hear?
Oh, I'm always very open to hearing advice. And I'm happy to take what works and leave what doesn't.
Yeah.
I usually feel like advice is at least well-intentioned, even if sometimes it doesn't connect with me or it might be wrong.
Yeah.
I can live with that.
Nice. Cool. Yeah. I'm someone where I feel like most of the advice I get is stuff that I've already heard a million times.
That's the thing. You're already the expert.
You're already the expert. Yeah, totally. And I applaud you for being open to it, even beyond that, because I know you've probably experienced that also.
Yeah.
So if anyone has any thoughts on seasonal affective disorder, write to me and then I'll filter that through to Cara.
Sounds great.
Yeah. Well, Cara, thank you so much. I really appreciate you being here.
This was fun.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Major Pain. I'm Jesse Mercury, your host and the producer of this podcast. Artwork by Egg Salad Salad. Our theme music is the song Time Machine from my sci-fi synth-pop album, available at jessemmercury.bandcamp.com. Send your thoughts or questions to our email address, majorpainpodcast@gmail.com. You can also use that address to find us on PayPal. Tips are greatly appreciated. Don't forget to leave a positive rating and review on Apple Podcasts or the podcast platform of your choice. Find more information about this show or leave a comment on any episode at our website, majorpainpodcast.com.